Hello, my name is Evan Jenkins, Senior Vice President of Government Affairs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We just heard from two CEOs who shared their views on the state of American business. Now we'll hear from two members of Congress from both sides of the aisle who will talk about the opportunities for action this year. Both are lawmakers who we work with each and every day. They are tremendous examples of the kinds of people Suzanne mentioned in her speech who can help achieve the ambitious and actionable goals she laid out. We'll start first with Congressman Dave Joyce, a Republican from Ohio and the chair of the Republican Governance Group. And then we'll hear from Abigail Spanberger, a Democrat from Virginia. Let's start with Congressman Joyce. Congressman Joyce, thank you so much for participating in the Chamber's annual State of American Business event. It's great to see you, and I've always valued our friendship.
Thank you very much, Evan. I was always sorry to see you leave because you're one of the people who actually work towards getting things done around here, which we need more of.
Well, we're going to talk about getting things done, and that's why you're my hero. In her agenda for America's strength, Suzanne called for immigration reform, permitting reform, new trade deals, and other actions that could bolster the economy, unleash innovation, and maintain our global leadership. Congressman, which of these priorities do you think have the best opportunity for bipartisanship in the new Congress?
Well, it's interesting that when we finally start to put our agenda forward, I think some of the things that we need to have some help on are going to be the committee that you and I were on, appropriations. I think first, the biggest thing we can do right now is set a budget and then sit down and start working on those things that on the appropriations committees, because if we can do that and actually pass appropriations, I think it'll go a long way towards curing a lot of those ills. Because if we look at it as a whole, I think it's important that in this Congress that we get down to real business of it. And remember that we have a Democratic Senate and a Democrat president. So unless we can work in a bipartisan manner, nothing's going to get signed or go into law.
With the House so narrowly divided, and you talk about getting things done with legislators, the need to coalesce together, they can have a significant impact when they do. And I said in the opening that you've been elected chair of the Republican Governance Group. Tell us a little bit about that group and what role you see that group being able to play in this governing process.
Our group is comprised of pragmatic members. We like to call ourselves the majority makers. But we used to be more close to purple, if you will, where we were center right, center left, to now having a pretty good expanse of going from a D+12 to an R27. And we meet on a weekly basis and carefully consider the policy stances that, and work on those things that are more important about making a difference and making a statement. We want to make sure that the government works. So we have our weekly luncheon, just had ours today, and had great turnout and about where are we going, so we discussed the legislation. Elise Stefanik is a member. She came and presented on behalf of leadership on some of the questions that were there about, the agenda. And, while they put out some of the bills right now, they're initially getting rolled out. We actually dig down into them and find out those things that are not good for people in our districts, or maybe weren't, as somebody puts out there, they're not considering that we have 435 members all coming, representing their districts and coming together to do this. But we've got the goal as a whole of breaking through Washington's dysfunctional partisanship to deliver results for America. And that's an important part of being part of this group, is that, from coast to coast, we just want to make sure that our conservative group needs are being met. And we also are then putting it out there in a way in which our constituents in America can understand the gains that we're making and work on the places where reform is actually possible, Evan. You know that. I mean, there's some pie in the sky folks out there thinking, that they're going to do things. But at the end of the day, where rubber meets the road, it's that appropriations process. It's this making sure that the spending and the goals that we set out through the budgetary process are being met. Because as you know, we've had some problems doing that over the last few years. And businesses are good about their 6 month, 1 year, 10 year plans. And we're lucky if we can get through next week. So yeah, we try to put us on a goal with a narrow majority to let the GOP leadership know we're there to work with them, but there's certain constraints that we all need to work under.
Yeah. You know, Congressman, you said where the rubber meets the road. Nothing could be more relevant to that statement than raising the debt ceiling. That's something that folks are talking about the year ahead. How are we going to navigate that? What do you see the ability to get through that critical issue in the upcoming year?
Well, it's something that I think is disconcerting in that folks think that somehow this is going to be a magic ball on how we change all of government. These are debts that are due and owing. We've incurred them, and we need to honor those debts. And so I agree that the national debt is out of control, and it's time we certainly take it seriously. But we need to start negotiating in good faith with the members on both sides of the aisle to talk about what we're going to do to start getting on the ramp towards getting us Good Ship America back out towards sea. Right now we're unfortunately looking at the iceberg that's in front of us, but we must stop worrying about the money that was already spent and figure out how we're going to fix these problems going forward and take care of that debt by making America work on these and explain the problems. And that's what I think the budget and appropriation process, explain the problems, how we're getting there, and then start to work on the solutions to that, and not coming up and using this as a last minute dodge to actually doing our work over the course of the year. And I think if we set that as knowing when the debt's going to be coming due and start working towards goals and making some realistic promises to the American people as well as to each other on how we can fix that, then we can finally start working on how we get that resolved and stop kicking the can down the road and telling these folks that some things that may sound good in a soundbite but are not in the best interest of our country. We need positive work moving forward.
Those were powerful words and comments, because I think they need to be said. They need to be said loud and clear, because I've always been so impressed with your willingness to be pretty candid about the process, the good and the bad, and the commitment to bipartisanship. And as we say, just getting things done. It's something you've always preached, and something you do each and every day in Congress.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's important that we realize there's 435 members here, and they all love their country. I don't doubt that for a moment. We might see the problems in different ways to solve those problems, but I always strive to work with members of my conference to try to understand that there's people across the aisle that also love this country, and we need to work together with them. Because as you know, in business, you don't get to change the rules every 2 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we put in things in place in this session, and then we lose the majority, and the Democrats come in and change everything, businesses don't have the ability to turn on a dime like that and change everything that they've been doing. So I think it's important that if we work with the members on the other side of the aisle, develop a roadmap for America that is essential. I know it sounds crazy, Evan, but a 1 year and a 5 year plan, and work towards those plans. We'd be working at what I want to do is the speed of business. We want to be able to work so we can work on the regulatory process, so it doesn't take 10 years to get new drugs or new roadways or bridges approved. And we need to start figuring out those things that are impeding business from getting to where we need to go by setting the country on the right roadmap. And once the businesses are productive, and once more Americans are working, and we take care of that business, then a lot of these problems will take care of themselves.
Well, the people of Ohio are sure lucky to have you, and the people of America appreciate those words. Congressman Joyce, thank you again for being a part of the Chamber's State of American Business program. And on a personal level, thank you so much for your friendship and, again, a decade of public service in Congress. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very kind, Evan. And please, I mean, if Mooney runs for something else and that seat in West Virginia opens, we'd love to have you back.
well, you're very kind. I'd like to turn to our next conversation with Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger of Virginia. Congresswoman Spanberger is a strong partner of the Chamber who is committed to bipartisanship action on Capitol Hill. Welcome, Congresswoman.
Thank you so very much for having me join you.
Well, thank you for joining me. I want to begin by asking you the same question I asked Congressman Joyce. The Chamber's agenda for American strength calls for immigration reform, permitting reform, and new trade deals. Which of these priorities has the most promise for bipartisanship in the new Congress?
I think there's possibility and promise for any of those three priorities, but certainly I think immigration reform is the most pressing and urgent of those priorities. And by extension, hopefully, the first of those priorities that we can make progress on. It's important. Certainly, I don't have to tell anyone who's a chamber member the importance to the economy, the importance to our communities, and ultimately our country. But I think that we've already seen positive steps forward that to me really indicate that our country is ready and at a point where we're able to take action. Certainly some bipartisan legislation that we've seen introduced in the Senate is a positive indicator that there is effort across the aisle in a bipartisan way of making steps forward. Certainly the fact that we have seen a bipartisan delegation of senators head to the border to talk about what are our security priorities, how do we marry up securing our southern border and frankly all of our ports of entry wherever they may be with the need for comprehensive immigration reform. And certainly the president's trip and meeting with our North American partners and leadership of Mexico and Canada have been, I think, important indicators of the timeliness, though I would personally argue with it is time because it's past time, but the timeliness of the issue and the need for immigration reform. And I hear it from business owners, constituents across our district. We need immigration reform across industry, across sector, across communities. And certainly this is an area where I remain hopeful despite the challenges we have faced along the way. I remain hopeful that we can make progress on this issue.
You've got the pulse, and I think we're all feeling exactly the kinds of signals that you've just suggested. So there is certainly hope springs eternal. Suzanne has also called for the U.S. to bolster its strength through global leadership. And as a former CIA officer, can you tell us what you see as America's role on the global stage?
I think America plays a variety of different roles on the global stage. Certainly, we are an example of a strong democracy. And I think even some of the challenges that our own democracy has faced, whether it's January 6th or some of the disruptions within our political system that are outside of our usual partisan back and forth, I think has been able to serve as an example that, every country that is a democratic nation might face trials and tribulations, but we have to reassert the strength of our democracy. So being an example, and certainly in light of what we just saw occur in Brazil, being an example that not only are we getting past events like the horrific day that was January 6th, but we are kind of reaffirming our belief in our own democracy and our commitment to democracy. When it comes to issues of national security and economic security, of course, we continue to be a global economic leader. And we have to protect the full faith and credit of the United States in order to continue in that role. And certainly when we're kind of approaching challenges related to the debt limit, ensuring the full faith and credit and our global economic standing should be a priority of every member of Congress. And it's important to every American. And then from a national security standpoint, supporting our allies and joining with our allies is an important priority for us. And I think that what we have witnessed over the past year since the invasion of Ukraine, we have witnessed the United States demonstrate that leadership. Certainly the United States lining up our partners and our allies in our united implementation of sanctions against Russia, in our united work to provide supplies, be it lethal or non-lethal aid to Ukraine, communications aid, medical aid, support. We have done extraordinary work that as a nation we should be proud of, as Americans we should be proud of in safeguarding and supporting the cause of democracy, but in being a vital ally to our friends in Europe, but in partnership with our NATO allies and countries across the country, or the world, excuse me.
And Congresswoman, you mentioned partisanship back and forth. You're right, it's something we certainly see. But you're a member of a coalition that reaches across the aisle and compliments to you. It's called the Problem Solvers Caucus. Tell us a little bit about this group and the key issues you think you'll be focusing on this year.
Well, the Problem Solvers Caucus, it's a group of Democrats and Republicans, and we join in equal numbers, Noah's Ark of politicians, if you will. And our whole focus is to try and say, where are the places where we agree? Where are the places we disagree? Where can we have earnest conversations about really important policy issues and come together to build a coalition? Certainly in the 116th and the 117th Congress, Problem Solvers played an important role in getting, as it relates to immigration reform, the Farm Workforce Modernization Act passed through the House. We did not get it through the Senate, so it did not go to the president's desk. But that was an important step forward, because in representing our communities, in representing the ideological and the political spectrum, we made very clear in the halls of Congress that this piece of legislation makes sense. It's important to the American people. It's important to farmers and producers in Virginia's 7th District, and it's important to our larger economy. And we were able to really build out a broad coalition. Again, unfortunately only in the House, but it was a good step forward. Last Congress, we led on the efforts of the infrastructure bill. And indeed, we, members of the Problem Solvers Caucus, had a summit that was hosted at former Governor Hogan's governor's mansion, where it was members of the House, the Problem Solvers Caucus, some of our counterparts from the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, and governors, Democrats and Republicans, to talk about what do we want to do as it relates to infrastructure. And this was back in the spring of 2021. And our foundational product, a scope of what infrastructure-related legislation we needed, our governors wanted, taking into consideration some of the challenges they have with kind of regulatory or implementation-related parameters that hit them on the executive side, and then from a legislative standpoint, what it is that we want to do and want to move forward. And ultimately, that bill became law, and our communities across the country, certainly in Virginia, are benefiting. So looking at the 118th Congress, where can this group of lawmakers who sit down in a room, have lunch together once a week or breakfast once a week, hash out differences, find common ground, where can we be kind of pivotal members? I think immigration reform is certainly one of the areas where we are focused. And ensuring the full faith and credit of the United States, hopefully, and being a part, certainly this year is a Farm Bill year. So many of our communities, I serve on the Agriculture Committee, many of the communities represented by members of the Problem Solvers Caucus are heavily agricultural or heavily impacted by the results of the Farm Bill. So my hope is that we can have an important voice in advocating for, coalition-focused, common sense-focused legislation or elements to the Farm Bill that are really going to help people, help our communities, and get passed and get that bill to the president's desk. It's a wonderful organization. Frankly, Congress there should be no need for it. It should just be Congress, Democrats, Republicans, arguing, debating. But until that day, I will love my involvement in this caucus and frankly, the perspective and the opportunity to work together that it brings to me.
One last question before I let you go. And you mentioned the Farm Bill. There are just a handful, as you well know, what we like to call as must-pass pieces of legislation. The similar description that you just gave on working across the aisle in a divided Washington, what about the path to addressing the debt ceiling?
So I'm a former CIA officer. My background is national security, and I know I'm speaking to a group of people that their background is business and the kind of economic structure and strength across our communities in our country. The issue of the debt ceiling is one that thankfully groups like the Chamber are highlighting, entities around the country are highlighting. It should be obvious that we as a nation should, and we as legislators should never even come close to calling into doubt our ability to address our fiscal standing in the world and guarantee our position of strength, and never do anything to jeopardize U.S. economic standing on the global stage, or our credit rating. And so that's the conversation I'm having around Capitol Hill. That any difference of ideology, any difference of politics, that's an argument to have, that's a debate to have, that's a policy issue. But risking the economic standing of the United States, risking default, risking kind of economic catastrophe is something that is not a tenable option. And so as somebody who has great relationships with folks kind of across the political spectrum, I have been putting that opinion, that position, I think it's a statement of fact out there. And certainly as a former intelligence officer, also kind of putting my experience on the forefront and saying this is such an important issue from a national security standpoint. And everyone really truly needs to understand the risk that we run if we even play with fire in terms of acting as though we will do anything other than be responsible legislators who protect the economic standing of the United States on a global stage. Any other debate is separate, but that's where I am on this.
Well, you come with such credibility on the issue in general from a global perspective, and the gravity with which you've just shared your thoughts, I think, is lost on no one. So thank you for your leadership so much. Thank you, Congresswoman Spanberger, for all of your dedicated service on so many fronts. Let me thank Congresswoman Spanberger and Congressman Joyce for joining me in the U.S. Chamber's State of American Business program and your strong partnership on these important issues to the business community.